European Union leaders gave Russia a week from Sunday to reverse course in Ukraine or face a new round of sanctions. The decision came as Ukraine's military said Coast Guard vessels were attacked from a beachfront in the village of Bezimene. A fierce battle also took place for control of the airport in the rebel stronghold of Luhansk, and there's growing concern the conflict could expand west to Mariupol and towards Crimea. Talks are also underway in Minsk as pro-Russia separatists request special status to stay part of Ukraine. Later, we'll talk with the Ukrainian ambassador to NATO and a former advisor to the Kremlin. But we begin with our correspondents in Russia and Ukraine, CCTV's Tom Barton and Kate Parkinson. And Kate, what's the latest as far as the battle is concerned in Ukraine?
Well, yes, heavy fighting continues here in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine's military said after fierce clashes with pro-Russian rebels, their troops had to withdraw from the airport in the eastern city of Luhansk. That's been a rebel stronghold for some time now, but the Ukrainian armed forces had managed to hold on to the airport. Well, not anymore. They've been forced to withdraw. There's also been fighting around the airport here in Donetsk. That's reportedly ongoing. The separatist fighters say some Ukrainian troops have surrendered, but the battle for Donetsk airport still ongoing. The rebels have certainly been making gains in the recent weeks against the Kiev forces, both here in Donetsk and in Luhansk, and they've been pushing south.
Okay, let's go to Tom. Tom, the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is insisting that regular Russian forces are fighting in Ukraine. How is Moscow responding to that accusation?
In two words, flat denial. That's the way they've been responding to those allegations all throughout this conflict. Both the foreign minister, the ambassadors to the UN and other ambassadors as well, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, all insisting there are no Russian troops in Ukraine. But it seems certainly on the international stage, they are about the only people left who believe that. They do carry on putting the blame on Ukraine, saying that Kiev is responsible for this conflict. However, again, in the international stage, they're constantly having to deny the presence of what some European powers say are thousands of Russian troops, tanks, military vehicles that have been allowing these rebels to make these gains. In fact, as Kiev says, it's not rebels at all. It's Russia now, and it's a great war with Russia. Russia sounding more militaristic, but still keeping up those denials.
Kate, President Poroshenko is also saying that Ukraine is, quote, close to the point of no return. What is he saying? Does that mean it's close to all-out war? And what's the latest that he's been saying?
Well, that's exactly what he's saying. He is saying that Ukraine is on the verge of a full-scale war, and he means a war with Russia. Today, he's been speaking again, very much placing the blame for the escalating violence in eastern Ukraine and the gains that the rebels have been making on the support that Kiev says the rebels are getting from Russian troops and Russian military equipment here in eastern Ukraine. Poroshenko saying that the presence of Russian troops in eastern Ukraine has dramatically changed the situation in the east, and he says it's now becoming increasingly difficult for Kiev's forces to manage the situation. Of course, Poroshenko and the government in Kiev very much calling on the West for more support as they try to battle with these pro-Russian rebels. And of course, the crisis in eastern Ukraine is likely to dominate talks at the NATO summit in Wales this week, and Poroshenko will be attending. He'll be asking for more help from NATO countries.
Tom, Presidents Putin and Poroshenko met last week. Is there the prospect of more talks between these two leaders?
There is a potential of it, but last week the gulf between them was enormous. They didn't really agree on anything when it came down to the big points. On the fundamental points about who's behind this and what the future of eastern Ukraine may be, they simply cannot see eye to eye. Unfortunately, at the moment, it seems like the only way this conflict is going is towards escalation.
And Kate, from your vantage point, any movement on peace talks at all?
Well, representatives from the pro-Russian fighters have been engaged in preliminary peace talks in Minsk today. It's not expected that there will be any great progress. Before the talks started, the rebels laid down some conditions. They said they want a special status for eastern Ukraine, and they said they would be willing to stay part of Ukraine, but they want that special status. They also called on Kiev to stop its military operations in the east. Now, on the surface, it's unlikely that Kiev would agree to these conditions because it would still mean that the pro-Russian rebels are still in control of the east of the country. But certainly the rebels will be hoping that the military advantage that they have at the moment will weigh on that decision.
Kate Parkinson in Donetsk, Tom Barton in Moscow, thanks to both of you for joining us.